Hey, and welcome again to Planet Product Owner. This is Scott. Hope you guys are doing great off of holiday maybe for a lot of you. I know that some of you have not had a holiday in a couple of weeks or a couple of months maybe, but we got one coming up here in the U.S. pretty soon. And so with that, this cadence that I'm trying to follow here is becoming more and more difficult, but bear with me while we get through this. Today, in episode 22, hard to believe, I got 22 episodes out here when this thing just started as a project, just something that I thought I might be able to pull off, but your continued feedback and support, listenership is very much appreciated, and I'm going to keep moving forward. So today what we want to talk about is, how do you know that you're working on the right stuff in a large organization? Do you suffer from feature-itis? It's easy to fall into the trap of what we call feature-itis. That's to say we just work on stuff, right? It's got some perceived value, and oftentimes we don't even have a good plan to measure what it is that we're delivering or what we intend to work on. So feature-itis gets really sideways when it seems that there's always work to do, but it doesn't seem like there's much movement in some of the metrics that we've talked about in the past. And it's not real hard to understand if you got feature-itis. You can feel it in your bones. What I want to point out to you is that getting these features ready by the right folks, this is what we're going to talk about today, is really important for us, so that we can help meet the why, help understand the why a little bit better. So some of the symptoms of feature-itis may include large-scale features that don't get measured or used, smaller bodies of work that suit a small number of users, items that just seems like they're out of place, or things like, did we really spend that much time and money to do this thing, So that's pretty easy, right? It's getting that same feeling over and over again, though, is often what larger organizations tend to struggle with. And so with larger organizations, you have larger frameworks, right? You got different silos. You have different places to get information. You have different teams working on different priorities and different schedules. So it makes it a little difficult, right? We talked about KPIs before and why it's important to have those identified. You got to have those visible in your organization. We talked about what I gave you that very original creative term, directional action verbs, in that episode when we were talking about metrics and measuring. But the thing is we want to be able to increase, reduce, improve, whatever. But we got to find these KPIs. We got to relate them. We got to use them. We got to make them visible by applying them to our work. And then we ultimately have to measure that, right? So hypothetical outcomes are what we're trying to prove in our line of work, but it's not enough to just produce a hypothetical outcome without actually measuring that outcome to see if you can prove true what you brought in to start with. Because the fact is, these things cost money, right? Let me give you a real-world example of what I'm talking about here. So just a few weeks ago, my wife wanted me to put up a shelf above the washer and dryer so she could put all this stuff on it. And so I said, hey, look, what kind of stuff are you going to put on there? She told me about the stuff she wanted to put on there, and I got an idea of the weight that this thing should support. And so, obviously, as y'all know, I'm a genius, right? So I figured out that I was going to need brackets to support 50 pounds worth of stuff for this shelf. So I bought those. I bought the shelving material. I put up the shelf, and when I was finished, I wanted to test it myself. So I have two 15-pound weight dumbbells there that I put on top of the shelf. And after I installed it and I looked at it, I knew I was pretty close to 50 pounds. So I felt pretty good about it after I tested it myself. I put up the shelf, and guess what? She never really put the heavy stuff on there. In fact, she didn't use it for what she asked me to use it for. I didn't solve her problem. Now, I solved a problem, right? But here's the problem for me is that the brackets that I bought were rated for 50 pounds, so that means they were $6 more expensive than the ones that were rated for 25 pounds. So I really just spent that money for nothing, but, it was the same level of effort, right? But it cost a little more just to put up the shelf. And once it was delivered, it wasn't used for the intended purpose of the design, and guess what? Never really got to measure the actual usage of this shelf because of the items that she just had to have on this shelf. and I hope she's not listening to this episode. But those things never made it to the shelf, so it was really never used in production. Point I'm trying to make here is that in our line of work, we do expensive work, okay? We need to make sure that we're producing in a way to justify what we're spending. Today's episode is going to journey through some of the potential causes and remedies for feature-itis. Now, there's a lot of factors for this, and I don't want you to think that these are the only things that we have to deal with to keep us from getting feature-itis. It's not. There's a lot of factors, but these are some of the top ones that I think I've learned about or found out about through larger organizations, in more than just one or two, by the way. So I'm happy to share that experience with you. Today I want to specifically address a couple of the biggest factors that I've seen, and how to maybe get ahead of them. So again, this episode number 22 is going to be a good one for product owners, product managers, anybody in what may be deemed as a program level, if you think of it that, and scaled agile, some scaled agile frameworks maybe. So we're going to talk about some of the things outside of the team for a minute, but they do obviously impact the team. So buckle up, hang tight, and let's get to Planet Product Owner. So, as I mentioned in the start of this episode, feature-itis is most common in larger organizations, I think, with what is some attempt at scaled agile, some kind of scaled scrum of scrums or more than one agile teams running through a program, right? So the most popular is SAFe, and I still don't know what the E stands for, but okay. Now look, I'm not downplaying the framework. I'm not saying good or bad about it. What I am saying is that since it's pretty popular, we're going to work from that framework, because I think a lot of larger organizations operate under that SAFe framework and that model. So we're going to kind of work from there. Don't get me wrong. Again, I said there are many factors contributing to feature-itis, so I don't want you to immediately believe that the SAFe framework is the culprit here. It's not really a culprit. It's like the getaway car, because it's the vehicle that's often misused. You've seen those movies where the getaway car is ready to go, but somebody tied it to a wall, or it's got a flat tire, or the guy forgets to leave it running and it won't start. That's kind of the way I think about it. It's because the vehicle was probably in pretty good shape until something else impacted it. I mean, it's a guidance, it's a framework, right? So, as you know, that framework provides for 3 levels of planning, execution, and governance. So let's start with one of those areas of that framework and go from there. Those 3 levels, by the way, portfolio, program, and team, those are all 3 needed. All right, so it's not like you're going to come in here and just have a team and that's it. That's not scaled. You can operate in a scrum of scrums like that, and that's cool. But like I said, many larger organizations have different portfolio and different program levels, things that they got to track and traceability and all that. So each of these levels feeds the other, and each feeds off of each other. So it's important to keep that in mind while we're journeying here. Without having those levels properly manned or accounted for with some self-organization, it's my belief that this framework or any framework is a check-the-box kind of thing. Sorry, I said it, but I know you hate me now. But look, what I'm simply saying here is that applying a scaled agile approach in your organization is cool. You get the buzzwords and the frenzy and the training and the badges and the certs and all that stuff. But look, if you're not starting with a firm foundation on the fundamentals of Scrum, Kanban, or whatever your flavor is, you're likely going to miss out on the larger benefits of implementing a framework like this. Now, it does present some challenges, but a lot of the challenges that it presents are ones that we knew going in. It said, hey, you're going to inspect and adapt. You're going to move through this thing. You've got 3 levels to apply this planning, execution, and governance with. But a lot of times we don't do that, right? So that's what I've seen anyway. Now, getting those buzzwords and getting that thing out there is cool, but if you don't fundamentally understand that what you're trying to do is inspect and adapt your work, deliver a little faster with more quality, and just put simply, you're trying to do better at delivering what you're delivering, okay? So, I'm not going to get on that too much in this one, but I would say that, quite frankly, if you are not benefiting from the full framework, you can pretty much throw it in the trash, because it's not going to operate to its potential. And all you're going to do is frustrate everybody if you're not working it to its potential. And one of those factors is, and what I want to talk about today is really kind of the who. Without the players on the field that make it work and the commitment to the self-organization that's needed, that's where we see a lot of feature-itis. That's where we see a lot of disconnects. That's where we see a lot of gaps, okay? So that's where we want to start. So in this segment, we're going to talk about the who that needs to be engaged. And again, not the only who's, but some of the more critical players, I think, in my mind. I think one of the biggest issues with scale agile frameworks is that we miss some of those key players from being in the game. Each of those levels, it's suggested, and there's reasons for that. You got organizational structures, you got transitions from one org to another, you got all this stuff. But the biggest thing is you got a misconception that agile means we don't have to do any requirements anymore. We don't need requirements. We're agile. We're supposed to just take what they give us and work it, and it'll be delivered faster with more quality. That's the way it works, right? Well, we all know that it doesn't because we work in this every day, right? So see if it's something you can relate to. You start with features, work item, or initiative, or whatever. It may or may not have a KPI that you're tied to, right? And then you start looking at the feature, and it's like, wait a minute, how is this really going to move this KPI? How are we really going to measure this? So, in fact, here's what happens. A lot of times we start with the idea, which means we have started with the what, and then we're scurrying around trying to find a KPI to hang on the what. Right? That's what it looks like. So, who's supposed to be assigning this value, right, to the thing in the first place? And if you answer the business owner, you're correct. Now, in larger organizations, it's been my experience that the business owner either doesn't exist or doesn't engage at the program level enough to become a visible part of the overall effort, which makes it more difficult for them to apply an estimated or relative planned value on everything else that you have through this scaled agile framework, right? So if they're not a part of the overall effort, then it's going to be difficult for them to do that. But it seems to me that if it's important enough to throw budget money around to get something done, you'd want to be a bigger part of that. You'd want to be a more vocal part of that, not just my feature or my what, my thing, right? So like I said, I'm not sure how you could actually arrive at a relative value estimation for business value, planned or actual or whatever it is, without having them be a part of the whole thing. And the business owner is called for, it is supported, it is suggested or advised in the program level in this one framework that we're looking at, okay? Now again, it's not the framework's fault that you didn't put a business owner in there and hold them accountable at the program level, right? But how do we get them engaged? We're going to talk about that in the next segment. But the player, that player usually has to be in the game in order to provide this level of engagement and value. The product manager is another one. That's another player at the program level, right? They got to be in the game. There's others, in larger organizations, run around often and scratch their heads and wonder why they suffer from feature-itis or why they can't get stuff done within one PI. Maybe it's time to reflect, right, on whether or not those players are in that framework if they're in the game. Maybe we do have those players in the game. So let's talk about the two we just mentioned. Let's start with the product manager, right? So if you're a product manager or even a glorified product owner, I would say that because we got a lot of product owners here who are wearing all of those hats, all of the above, right? You need to make sure that the right business owner is part of this planning that you're trying to do to get these features going to start with. They need to lead the effort, right, of proving out that the indicators that are provided are at least somewhat valid. If they don't have the right metrics around what they're asking the teams to do, they're not going to get what they want out of it. That just makes sense, right? Because remember, you're trying to drive this based off of moving the needle somewhere, some needle, right? So it's a self-organized operation at the team level, right? So it's a self-organized, it yields itself to be a self-organized relationship or a working agreement or whatever in the program level as well. But we know the many disconnects because we get, people out of this organization or that one or this reporting structure or whatever, and then we have so many other influences when we're talking about scaling this outside of one unit, right? So the product owner has to make decisions, right, based on that input from the product manager and from the business owner. And I think it's vital for them to be in there so that they can execute effectively. They got to be able to be on the same page. Now, I know we all don't have the privilege of being part of the program level, but that's where strong product management comes into play. The folks at this level of the overall art or agile release train, if you're working again within the constructs of that framework, must engage the teams and the product owner alike. So the product on the program level, you've got to be engaged with the teams and the product owners, right? But you also got to be in the business. Now, I'm not going to get into my 484 model today for walking through inception, construction, elaboration, and transition, but maybe one day I will. I'll share with you guys because there's obviously more people who have to be engaged with the feature authoring or the writing of it, development of it, and how it's presented to the team level. But let's focus on something here that I want to make sure you catch. Remember how I've always told you, product owner, that you are on a balance beam between technology and business. Well, the same is true for the product manager, but in my opinion, they should be on the balance beam between the business owners and the teams. So the business owner and the team. So think about that product manager if you're wearing that hat, if you're on the balance beam, and you got to keep your butt on that beam, because if you don't, you're likely not going to be working on the right stuff, or your stuff's not going to be ready to get worked. Okay? If you're not balancing that relationship. Now, the team's going to tell you when they need more feedback or input. The business owner's going to tell you that, yes, you're checking my box and you're getting my project assessed or whatever, okay? But you're not going to be able to do that if you're not getting the collaboration going back and forth between them in that triangle, right? You obviously have to have technology assistance, so you're not setting expectations that can't be met, because that's one way to quickly get your front porch dirty, and you know we don't want our front porches dirty, right? So if you're not giving those folks a heads up of what's coming down, you're going to have a dirty front porch, all right? And this is all, again, contributing factors to feature-itis. So I hope you're not a victim of feature-itis. But so you got to be able to get ahead of it. That's the point. So when we're talking about this who right here, remember my example about the ice cream shop? The ice cream shop has 100 flavors, but only 18 of them actually sell. If you're not on this balance beam and making sure there's a balance between valuable business work and what the teams are executing, you're likely going to have stuff on the shelf for a long time in your inventory, and it's going to spoil. Okay? And what that means, like for me, is my business owner on my shelf that I built, I don't know what happened there, but she's just not going to use it for that. Anyway, that's another point. So I think we all realize the why, right? The why these folks have to be self-organized and joined at the hip. And so I hope you understand that those two key players have to be in the game. All right, they got to be in the game, and now we have to find out what it is that they actually do. What is their what, right? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next segment, so hang tight. So we talked a little bit about the who. Now, let's talk about how these features can be effectively created in the first place, right? This kind of leans into the what. So maybe just a couple of quick checks will help us go a long way. And, you know, these are some of the things that I work with when we're developing features now. And in the past, I've applied some of these things here because, again, we're doing expensive work. We want to make sure that it's valuable. So maybe you start by taking a closer look, right, at something in your backlog or your funnel or an analysis or whatever now, and see if any of these 5 things can be applied. So I'm going to give you 5 things. Ready? All right. Number 1, can it be measured to impact some metric? Okay. Can it be measured? Number 2, can it be measured by either some non-solicited, solicited, or usage feedback? Can we measure some kind of usage feedback or some kind of solicited or non-solicited? That's opinions or feedback online or whatever, okay? Even a survey, whatever, right? Number 3, can it be sized within one PI or time box? All right. Does it support the true desire of the business goal? That's one that is often overlooked, and you're like, oh my God, are you kidding, dude? This is so elementary. But you would be surprised if you go back and look at some of these things. You know this as a product owner. You've seen some of these features come out, and it's like, well, wait a minute. What is really the business goal here? And they're like, well, we wanted to, well, hold on a minute, because this thing that's not supporting this, right? We got to take a critical look at it. Number 5, does it tie to some sort of strategic theme or KPI that your organization is wanting to move, right? So, I mean, because it's top down, right? You wouldn't have scaled agile. You wouldn't have a need for it, I guess, in most cases, unless you were tying this to some overall overarching strategic theme. So, can it be measured to impact some metric? Can it be measured by some kind of usage, solicited or non-solicited feedback? Can it be sized within one PI or time box or increment? Does it support the true desire of the business goal? And does it tie to some sort of strategic theme or KPI? Now, I'm not saying that if you can't answer all of these questions and qualify them with a yes, and give some numbers behind it or whatever, I'm not going to tell you that it's not valuable work. That's not true. Okay, remember, I've said before, and you've heard me say this, that value is sometimes in the eye of the requester. Okay? But even when that's the case, we have to be able to challenge the value of what's being asked for because, again, we do expensive work. Okay? It costs money for us to run around and put our little sticky notes on the board and move stuff from left to right and watch all that stuff kind of come to fruition and then sit on the shelf, right? And don't put our stuff on there. But you get what I'm saying. So, see, without having asked and answered these questions for each feature, we won't be able to gain some relative estimation for business value. Because if we're not measuring one, we're not measuring any, right? If you're not applying some kind of principle behind how you're qualifying what your estimated or relative business value is, it's going to be hard for you to look at 10 features across the board and say, this one is more than that one. Right? This one has more relative planned business value or whatever the metric is that you're trying to use there, right? So you got to qualify the stuff. So that's why the business owner should be providing, right? It's what they should be providing. They should be, that relative estimation for business value is what the business owner should be providing. It's what the product manager should be supporting, and it's what the product owner and team should be delivering. All of those go through the same, right? So read through one of your asks or requests and see if you find some arbitrary numbers associated with it maybe. Maybe some kind of hypothesis statement about the business impact this thing's going to have. I think it's important for us as product owners and product managers to prepare features so that they're ready for a team to work and commit to, while having some new tools in your belt to help you identify some gaps and risks associated with the work that you'll ultimately commit to. So I think it's equally important to think through the why first. Y'all know I've harped on that forever, right? But think about why you're doing what you're doing. The what that we're doing must be derived from and in support of the why. And we've talked about that, right? So going back to those 5 questions that we talked about, measuring this against some stuff and having a plan for measurement. Again, I'm reminding you, in case you missed the first segment, we've been talking a lot about SAFE today. Just wanted to kind of point that out, but we should be making sure that some kind of KPIs or at least some kind of metric we're hoping to impact with some directional action verb like up, down, increase, decrease, reduce, whatever, that kind of stuff in there. But oftentimes, like I said in the first segment, we don't really have that, right? We often have folks identifying critical things that have to be done in order to solve critical things. But we have very limited data to actually support what they want to accomplish. Now, I'm not saying you do. I'm not saying you don't. I'm not saying you fall victim to this. What I'm pointing out, though, is that if you're not using these kinds of metrics, you're not doing yourself any favors because you're not qualifying the value of your work, which is why I started this episode, because I had a listener ask me to speak about planned business value and actual business value. And I don't think we can have that conversation until we've had this one. The who, the what, and the how we get these features or these larger efforts or initiatives or whatever in this framework kind of walked through, right? So even though you got some data points, we as product owners and product managers have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence around those metrics, right? So in order to qualify some kind of work that improves this metrics this metric rather in the direction we want them to go, we come up with a feature or an initiative that's headed our way. Yay! So exciting! We got work to do, right? Now, as we start reading through the details of what's desired, we see some things in the benefit statement like, currently we have X number of calls per day to answer this question, and we believe that providing this self-service opportunity to our customers will reduce call volumes for a service department by X number of calls a day, right? Now, there's a couple of things that I want to point out about these metrics now. So this is one of those things that, again, you might have to listen to this a couple times, but I think you'll get the point. If you are using metrics around your features or around the work that you're trying to qualify and justify, the numbers approach could be a little bit misleading. I've seen people put 100 KPIs, or not KPIs necessarily, but 100 metrics that needed to be reported on and checked out. Well, okay, that's great. You really feel like you're going to move all of those with what it is that you're doing. That's pretty lofty, right? I also seen people just put a number on there like an X, right? Just because we had X number of calls per month or per day or per quarter or whatever, that doesn't mean that it's a large number relative to the whole. I've seen people try to sell that before. Y'all remember when I told you about my little testing fiasco where we were like, we got to have 97% to go to production, so I told them to write 150 test cases. We're testing every sentence, every letter. So you understand what I mean? Does that improve the quality, right? So in other words, what if X number of calls only represents really 0.0275% of the total calls that we're taking in, right? Is that really going to get to the heart of the metric that we intend to move? If we're under the impression that X was really a large number, it turns out it's just a drop in the bucket, right? So in the end, our hypothesis was kind of vague and misleading as it relates to the true values of what we're working on. But it's going to get a high score on the business value, right? Because it's got buzzwords like customer satisfaction scores or reduced call volumes, right? Let's just be careful about what it is that we're doing here. And I'm going to get to why that's really important for you as a product manager in the next segment when I start talking to you about how the product owner is going to start talking to you, product manager or business owner, about the features you're writing. So next, we don't know the audience that's going to presumably be taking advantage of this yet unless we've done a lot of research on it, right? You've probably done some research on it, and that's great. We got it. But let me ask you this. Are the ones that you are asking, they might like your UX, but are they likely users of this feature? Are they likely callers into your service center? Right? So let's think about those things. What kind of testing can we do ahead of that to make sure it's solving the right problem, it's addressing the right need, right? So there are three things that I've always kind of gone to, and I'm going to run through these real quick. Whenever I've done an enterprise system, there's three rules that I follow, and if it does not support all of these three things, I don't do it. It's increase adoption, decrease the need for support, and promote an enterprise approach. Those three things I've always done. That's something we're going to do, right? We're going to increase adoption, we're going to decrease the needs for support, and we're going to promote the enterprise approach. Right. So one thing that's often very looked is the value in user adoption. There is value in user adoption. There is value in usage. Okay. You know, when we look at some of these features that we want to try to increase self-service, or we want to increase usage on the system or whatever to move this thing. I just want you to remember that if you produce something that users are not willing to adopt, you lose. If they don't use it, and excuse the Scottism here, if they don't use it, and again, I know I've got a 14 and under audience in some countries here, but we're just pissing in the wind, right? I mean, if the users aren't going to use it, then what have we done? User adoption, in my opinion, is the number one thing that we have tended to lose focus on in a lot of these efforts. And I think it's the number one thing that we can probably focus on. And here's why. It's because we've talked about customer collaboration over contract negotiation before, right? This whole approach of getting to lean delivery models and methods was centered around the customer. It's customer-centric, right? The focus got to be focused on the customer. If we don't do that, we're missing the point. And that's why it really hacks me off when you get people coming to the window and it's like, as a product owner or as a product manager that if you update this widget or if you make this thing dance or if you do this thing over here or you put this button there or if you put in this module that might not make sense to the entire rest of the world, but you know that module makes sense to increase user adoption and to decrease support, it has value. But you get a bean counter or somebody coming into your area and it's like, we're only going to work on things that add value to the business. Well, you know what? To that I say, hey, look, I don't need some Johnny-come-lately telling me how to get user adoption up. All right? I just don't. So glad I got that off my chest. Excuse me. I am the product owner. I am the product manager. I am the one set and ready to prioritize these things that increase what it is that we're doing in the market, or what it is that we're doing in the usage, or how it is we are influencing the users to use our app and not theirs, or to take advantage of something, whatever it is. So that's on me. Product owner, product manager. That's on you, right? So there, I said it. Now, are we sure that what we're proposing, though, meets the actual goal? You know, we talk about that up there in my little 5 points that I gave you right there. That's the biggest thing. You know, I think it's funny. You've seen this before too, and I'm not saying anything that you guys haven't seen before. If you're listening to this, I know you have. You've seen it before. We come out with this big grandiose plan to accommodate every borrowed problem under the sun, every borrowed scenario under the sun. But all we wanted to do was have the user do this little thing on their own, right? Or we wanted to offer this thing to the customer, right? So, or is that really what we wanted, right? I mean, I have to ask sometimes, because it's like, it seems to me we wanted to fix our problem instead of fixing the customer's problem. And maybe, just maybe, this thing is so content dense that we have forgotten all about that part, which is why we started. So now maybe we're a little more critical and intentional about the way we're creating these features and how we're authoring it and what we're looking at in order to qualify our valuable work and ensure and protect that we're not getting feature-itis. And hey, by the way, it's not just copy and paste meeting notes into the acceptance criteria. I just want to get that off my chest. It's about solving the problem, exceeding the need, or making the most of an opportunity, right? That's what we're in this business for the customer. All right. So now I've gotten that. Hang around for the next segment when we talk a little bit more about the how. So we've talked a little bit about the who, we've talked a little bit about the what. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the how. Now remember, this is not an all-inclusive list. Okay, some of these factors that I'm introducing to you today or covering today are things that we that we often encounter. I hear this a lot through a lot of different organizations. So what I want to do is talk through some of the ways that we might be able to prevent feature-itis, ways that we can actually self-organize a little bit better between program and team levels. So the idea is, I don't want you to just tell me the what, okay? So if you're a product manager, listen up. And if you're a product owner, you got to challenge. You got to challenge the product managers here, the business owners here even. You got to challenge this. Here's some of the things that I'd like for the product manager or the business owner, which, again, should be working together on this. I'd like for them to be able to provide this. Like I'm 3 years old, okay? So like I'm 3 years old. Have a nice little elevator speech, 10 to 15 seconds, whatever, about this, right? If there's not a tidy elevator speech in our spiel here, we're probably already in trouble. Okay? We're probably already in trouble, product manager. Tell me about the problem to solve or the opportunity we have to improve. Just describe that for me a little bit, right? I want to have that somewhere where I can read through it and make sure that it matches up to the what that you're asking me to do. Tell me what metric or metrics you're planning to use. Because if you don't have those, then chances are, it may be valuable to you, but it might not be valuable to the rest of the organization's goals, right? Tell me who wants it. Tell me who needs it. Tell me who's asking for it. Tell me who thinks it's a problem. Tell me who thinks it's an opportunity. I'm real interested to hear that stuff. And that doesn't mean the boss, right? That doesn't mean, well, my boss told me. Nope. It means the user, the audience, the customer who has the issue or thinks it's a problem or who thinks it's an opportunity. Because remember, we got to be customer-centric. And again, we may be offering things that solve our problems, but we should not be creating problems for our users, our customers, right? And look, tell me one last thing before we get out of here. Tell me one last thing. Why haven't we already done this? It's important. It's really important to know. I mean, Why haven't we already done this? We've got a 4-alarm fire going off right here. This is the highest priority for the entire world, and we've got to move everything around because you came to PI planning, hijacked my backlog. Why have we not done this before? Then you're going to find out kind of some of the drivers behind it. Product owner, product manager, you got to know this stuff. Okay. So when we're talking about getting these things put together, we got to take a critical look at these numbers at the face value, right? We can't take the hypothesis at the face value. Maybe we're not working on the right problem. Maybe we're working on a process issue. Maybe we're working to solve a process issue and we're trying to solve it with software. Maybe that's it. Maybe there's something operational going on and we're trying to solve it through the system. But remember, you can work on your problems, but don't create problems for the customer. But you really want to try to solve the customer's problems more than yours, right? Now, I know in operational areas, in larger organizations, we have to do that. But again, remember, value is often with the requester, okay? And they probably got some metrics or some numbers to point back to for the work that you're trying to do. So here's the thing. If we want to reduce call volumes, right, but we don't even know that this thing's going to do it, we got to have a way to measure it. Okay, we got to have a way to tie it back to make sure that and prove it out, right? So we can effectively qualify what we're asking a team to do, but it takes more than just throwing something together without a lot of thought behind it. But often we're really unable to arrive at this because of what ends up happening a lot of times is we get an idea first, we start with the what, and then we scramble around to try to hang a KPI on it. What we should be doing is the opposite. Look at the metrics, look at the KPIs, and then find a way to impact them. Okay? So if we're planning according to the KPIs that we want to move, we can measure, we can apply some swag to the planned business value. We can't do it though if we just don't have the data, right? And we can't do that if we don't know what we're measuring. Okay? So you can't measure what you can't manage, and you're not going to manage what you're not measuring, right? It comes to those things, right? So the value really can't be applied without an engaged business owner at program level. It can't be applied without the metrics to support the hypothesis and for the product manager to be actively engaged. And it's not just them, right? There's a whole host of folks at that level that need to make sure that they're playing their part. So let's land this plane, get off this crazy planet for a little bit, because I don't know what you guys think about this episode, but I look forward to hearing your thoughts. So let's talk a little bit about what we talked about maybe. So in the end, we have to take a better look at what we're offering to the teams if we want to prevent feature-itis. We also have to make sure that we have the right people in the game. They're playing, right? And that we're addressing the gaps in the self-organized fashion with any scaled framework that we're operating under. Because if you've got a scaled framework, oftentimes you don't have the self-organization that you really need. Okay? So you got to be grown up about that. We also have to make sure that we have a built-in plan to measure what we're building, whether it's solicited or non-solicited feedback or proof in the numbers or usage since the change. And remember, kids, when something deviates from its normal behavior, it's the result of a change, right? So that's good or bad. Be prepared to be challenged and don't take it personally. That is the most important thing to remember. Product owner, if someone comes in to try to help you and they tell you that your story sucked, don't take it personally. Listen to what they have to offer. Product managers, if you've written a feature with a business owner and somebody tells you this is crap, don't take it personally. Now, people shouldn't be coming to you and telling you it's crap. I get it. But at the same time, let's inspect and adapt together. Let's work together. It's empirical, right? So this is where a lot of product managers and product owners and even business owners get sideways when you start being critical of their work. We can't do that, though, because remember, this is self-organized. This is empirical. This is all of us in together. We are a self-organized team, and that scales up as it does scale down. So if you take care of a solid and well thought out elevator speech and you can summarize quickly who we're giving it to and why we're doing it, and then the what becomes kind of self-explanatory, right? We don't need you to tell us what if you're telling us why we're doing it. A lot of times, really, because sometimes the why and the what are in direct conflict and competition with each other. I'm sorry to say it that way, but I hope you're kind of getting what I'm laying down here, right? So most importantly, don't focus on the what. Really, don't focus on the what. Start with the why and find out which metric or KPI is the one that should be tied to that. Okay? Now, look, sometimes just to finish up here, sometimes the metric or the number that we want to move doesn't move. Now, I'm not going to get into leading and lagging indicators and all that stuff in this episode, but just know that if that happens, you may just want to look at the solution and revisit what you provided and see what it was that you were really trying to prove. Okay? But let's face it, if you're not able to get some predictability in the metrics that you intend to move as a result of your work, you may not be working on the right things, and you may be suffering from feature-itis, my friend. Hey, until next time, have a safe and fun lean journey. Don't forget to subscribe, tell a friend, and send me your feedback, please, because I know I'm going to get good feedback off of this one at scott@planetproductowner.org.